Well, it's a great pleasure to be back. I am aware from the various emails and phone calls I've received, there are a number of shareholders who are attending this, who are waiting with bated breath to find out what's going on. So I hope this presentation is going to help enlighten them as to the current status at the Samdong tungsten mine. My name is Lewis Black. I'm the CEO of Almonty, and we are currently building formerly the world's largest tungsten mine in South Korea. And
Mr. Black, just before you go on with the presentation, one thing, you said a lot of shareholders are there. If you have any questions and you're a shareholder, you're participating, please use the Q&A box, use the chat box, and then we'll make sure to have all the questions answered. Thank you. You can go on.
Oh, thank you. So this presentation will also be available on the website shortly after this forum. But we are a tungsten producer. This is what we know. We don't know much about anything else. We have a mine in production for 126 years in Portugal. We have a second project called Valtrashal that's still going through permitting, which is getting, obviously, in any democracy, takes longer and longer than you would like. We have a Los Santos project, which is in care and maintenance, but there will be an announcement shortly about that project, and it's good news, so I wouldn't worry too much. And we have, of course, what's considered to be the masterpiece in our industry, which is Samdong, which is was the most coveted tungsten mine that existed. We were very fortunate to be able to acquire it in a bit of a bear market, and we were then, even with greater fortune, able to finance it with possibly, from what I've been told by those in the sector, the best lender that exists, tier one lender, which is KfW IPEX. The tungsten market is essentially 90% comes from basically China and Russia. And we will account, when fully opened at Samdong, roughly 30% of non-Chinese supply, 7 to 8% of global supply. Demand is continuing to increase, especially in the defense sector, but we're seeing in Korea through semiconductors, and of course, the battery applications that are now being engaged with in South Korea, the anodes and cathodes. The location of this mine is in a country which has the highest consumption of tungsten in the world per capita. And we see, on average, over the last decade, a growth of 7 to 8% per year just in that market. So we are very well positioned to be in such a location to start with. The corporate snapshot is, I think, is fairly straightforward. I am the third largest shareholder, so I'm very much aligned with my shareholders. Our share price, look, there's a number of different, theories out there, but ultimately we've obviously had, like everyone else, a little bit of a wobble, and no one really knows what we're doing. And that, I think, I, of course, have to take responsibility for that, but I've been focused on the operations of this. Now I am starting to really push up the PR to take this story to a much wider audience, both in Korea and the US. We've already engaged a PR person in Korea. So I think you're going to start seeing a greater coverage of this story, because I think what the team has achieved has been quite remarkable. And I think this has to be shared with the wider investing community. A couple of notes: since our end of year audit, our long-term debt has come down by roughly 20% as we reduce that. And we intend to continue to refocus our attention on our balance sheet going forward. As I said earlier, the producing assets is in Portugal. It's been going 126 years. It's got another 20 years under its belt. We've just completed a new ore bin, which we all do in-house, so we don't bring in third parties, which is testament to the technical skill of the team. Samdong is now fully under construction. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Valtrashal, as I said, is still in permitting, but ultimately, as all mining companies are finding, permitting in democracies is now a very lengthy, laborious process. And Los Santos, there will be news shortly about our plans there, but as I said, it's not bad, it's good. Tungsten price has been extraordinarily resilient, even in the recent dips. We've seen, as we say here, a 60% rise in the last year and a half. This has been driven by essentially demand, which is, of course, the perfect, not speculation. You can't speculate this commodity because it's quoted on the London Metal Bulletin. It's solely from demand. Demand in Europe is not great. Demand in the US is off the charts. And the demand in Asia is strong. So I think we're seeing certain sectors, say in the EU, in the car sector, where we've seen a decline in consumption because of the bottlenecks they face from the shortages of things like semiconductors. But we've seen predominantly defense really pick up the slack. And defense is what I feel, and traditionally with tungsten, when it was more valuable than gold back in the 50s and 60s, was driven by defense. Defense is going to have an extraordinary impact, especially in the US, on tungsten going forward over the next 3 to 5 years. There is inherently a shortage of tungsten and of capacity for defense. We also talk the nano tungsten oxide is now being used extensively through all the major battery manufacturers in Korea for the anodes and cathodes. And at a high, let me use a very little amount of tungsten, but what it enables them to do is it enables them to charge the battery much faster. It can generate much more heat. And more importantly, it's not combustible. So we believe this technology, which South Koreans are now using, will find its way through all of the battery sector because of the properties of tungsten that has made it so successful in other sectors. It is also lending itself very well to batteries. This is a slide essentially just talking about where we're seeing this growth. Electric vehicles, obviously, it's an important component. As I said earlier, the semiconductor business, you need tungsten hexafluoride gas to pump into every semiconductor. The idea and concept behind this has always been you can coat the inside of a semiconductor with a highly conductive tungsten, and also you can generate a huge amount of heat so you can put more processing through the semiconductor. So it's been a backbone of semiconductor production for many years. And of course, the military tension. What has been highlighted by these atrocities in Ukraine is that the Western ability to produce armaments has been diminished over the last generation, over the last 30 years. And in a traditional land war, which ultimately is raging, currently, there isn't the capacity to produce more armaments to actually field the various artillery and tanks that are required. So we're seeing from all of our customers an increase in inquiries regarding demand because governments are now pushing them to increase their capacity for production. I think this is going to have an extraordinary short and midterm impact on demand. And given that 90% of the world's tungsten comes from China and Russia, it creates an unusual situation, but obviously a very positive one for those who operate in safe jurisdictions. Samdong. Okay, this is for all the shareholders who have attended, who want to know what's happening. Obviously, you are very well aware that this is a vast deposit. We only know a very small part of it, and what we know is 90 years. Our mine in Portugal was run for 126 years. So this is not an exception within tungsten. It has happened before. In terms of the moly, which you see on this diagram, we're not going to talk about the moly right at this moment. Our focus, as we're going to discuss a bit later, is in the downstream. But the moly is something which is also for the future and for domestic consumption within Korea. I always like this slide because, we're not a good-looking bunch, but we know tungsten. And I think that's what defines us as a company. We have multi-generational experience in the production and processing of tungsten, which is an extraordinarily difficult metal to process. And if in any part of the process you get it wrong, so whether it be grade control, whether it be tramming, whether it be crushing, grinding, and milling, and then into the plant, if any part of that is out of sync, your entire recovery goes to pot and you will not recover. And so I honestly believe that had we not had this depth of knowledge, there is no way that we could have attracted KfW Apex to this financing of Samdong. No way. it's a tier one ore body. I mean, you can slice and dice it any way you like. It was able to attract a tier one financing because it is a tier one project. And that is what sets it apart from everything else that's out there. And be a tier one project doesn't just mean that you have large reserves and high grade, which we have. It's location, it's the cost centers, it's your compliance with ESG, Equator Principles. There is a number of factors that have to be considered. And when you meet those targets, you qualify for the best financing that exists. The fact that we are a small company and we're able to attract that is testament to the team and what they were able to achieve. In terms of cost, I think it's well known that Samdong, because of grade and its location, is expected to be in the lower percentile of cost production. Well, this gives you an idea. It's huge. I can safely say this mine will operate long after I'm gone. I mean, gone as in the box, rather than gone as in leaving the company. So I think that grade and reserves are not my worry. My worry is, how do I continually develop this project and value add to the benefit of all of us? The project is underpinned with obviously a 15-year offtake with GDP, which is for 45% of its output. The other 55% is free and clear to do as what we wish, and what we wish is to downstream it, but we'll discuss that shortly. We have, as I said, a tier one financing supported by essentially the EU. This gives you an idea, conservative idea of commissioning. So we have now resolved all issues with shipping. Everything is now in country that we require. Scalping has already commenced. For the surface works, we expect to put the pads down in 45 days, and this plant will go up. At the outside, we will commission the end of Q2 2024. I know that this has been a painful and long journey, but we have essentially had to operate in a way that, one, our budget allowed us, the most important, staying within budget, and we are comfortably still within budget and will remain so till completion. Secondly, as we said, we operate in a democracy, and we are all permitted, we're fully permitted, but we have to operate discreetly. In Korea, they say like a submarine. The last thing you need is, during the phase of construction, is to not adhere to all of the different environmental compliance regulations that you have to respect and you have to work with. And so the ramp up to actual surface construction has taken longer than we would have liked, but as it was, the shipping was also hugely delayed, and I think that's a well-trodden path. I think shipping has been chaotic for the last 24 months for everyone. But underground is now roughly probably 7 months ahead of schedule. Mine development has continued underground, but surface works have now started in earnest. And I think we're going to start seeing some surface construction, physical plant construction within the next 60 to 90 days. They'll be all up on the website. We've also been working on the phase 2. So currently we're on phase 1 construction. Phase 1 construction is as contemplated. We pass 640,000 tons a year. We supply Plant C for their offtake, and we generate the kind of earnings that we expect. Phase 2, something we've been contemplating now for about 3 years. And ultimately, this means increasing our output to 1.2 million tons and building a tungsten oxide plant to provide material to domestic consumption within South Korea. And this has another extraordinary impact on our earnings and revenue. And I think that we've now completed the scoping study. This is work that KfW are very supportive of as well. We have ultimately the capacity to produce. And what's interesting about this mine is that we have a phase 2 to 1.2 million tons. But if the Western consumers came to us and said, look, we've got a real problem here. We've got a real problem with diversity of supply. We've got supply concern issues. We need you to expand even further. The wonderful thing about this project is that you have such scale, such size, that it's really just a question of time and money to continue to expand this project even further past 1.2 million tons. Of course, my engineers will go crazy because it's going to require even more infrastructure works underground, but you have that ability. You're not limited by a finite resource. And I think ultimately, with the combination of being in a transparent jurisdiction, and that's important for phase 2, because you'll be the only tungsten oxide plant in the world that is totally transparent and vertical. With that transparency and with that ability to expand dramatically, even from 1.2 million tons, it gives you the opportunity to really add value to this, and will offer great value to the tungsten consuming market in the West. And so this is obviously at a glance, it gives you a concept of what we're trying to achieve with phase 2. On the top of this, we see in phase 1, we produced 65% concentrate, likely be about 68% we'll send to GDP Plant C, and then the downstream will be through a tungsten oxide. And whether we go to the milling to nano size fractions for the technology sector in Korea, or whether we also produce a carbide for the local domestic market as well, this is under discussion. But the addition of a carbide plant to a tungsten oxide plant is a nominal cost. So, but the scoping study is finished tungsten oxide, and economically, this makes a great deal of sense. This gives you an idea, and you can see here from the cash flow what sort of profound effects that we are expecting to see from this. We have our repayment period for the loans from KfW, but again, they are a development bank. They're a very cooperative lender. They're interested to see this project succeed, and I think that's very important if you're in the mining business to have that in a lender. And I think their desire to look now at the downstream is also testament to the belief and confidence they have in us as a team. This is, again, the high level and conservative view of what we look at the downstream. And in terms of dates, I expect to be probably 6 months ahead of this, but I think realistically, it is eminently doable, because in terms of permitting, this plant will be located in a industrial park, which is already permitted. It's about 28 kilometers from us. We have a number of different options for industrial parks, but this one is about 28 kilometers that I favor. And they come already permitted. So you turn up and build, which is, a huge defining difference from, say, for instance, developing a tungsten oxide plant in Europe, where you'd have to go through an entire permitting cycle, which of course adds a number of years to the whole process. Panascara, she's still going. She's making money. She still produces the best homogeneous concentrate in the world. She's got 20 years, I estimate. But this has really been the driver for Samdong. This knowledge here is what's made it possible. Samdong was always a technically difficult project because it was conceived in the early 20th century and it had to be brought back into Equator Principles, ESG compliance of the 21st century, and to be done so in a commercially sensitive way and commercially viable way. And I think that's only been possible because of this mine. The knowledge in this mine has allowed us to take Samdong and bring it into a compliance, which will make it the most technically advanced tungsten mine in the world. It'll make it the most ESG compliant tungsten mine in the world. It'll be in the top percentile of essential approaches to mining that exists anywhere. And this is one of the drivers for KfW, but this mine has been able to do that for us. Again, we've just completed our new tailings dam, which we did all in-house. It's another 9 years of capacity. So we basically, I mean, even this slide here, we're showing the water treatment plant, which we've designed for Samdong. It gives an idea of the strength of technical knowledge contained within us. In terms of reserves, we are in a very good place in terms of longevity. We have the ability to be around for a long time. I think we've been on a long journey for Samdong, but we're building a mine that's going to go for 100 years. It's important that we remember that, and we have to build it right, and it has to work out the gate. We haven't stopped working in the pilot plant. We haven't stopped refining and honing our flotation process to make it even more efficient than we had originally designed. The time we've spent in this journey has not been wasted. When this thing opens, it is going to have a profound effect, I honestly believe, on supply. And I think because of its longevity, it has an enormous value. So to conclude, we have a world-class mine, tier 1 mine in Sandown. Financing is done, we're fully financed, we're under construction. Tungsten sits at the top of pretty much everyone's critical metals list, not just South Korea, but the EU, the US, Japan, Australia, the UK, China, Russia. It's all on the top list because of its uses. Our team, well, as I said, we don't know anything else but tungsten. Tungsten is what we know. We know a bit about moly, but tungsten is really where our strength lies. And the construction, as I said, is ongoing. And thank you very much. And now I've left a few minutes for questions.
Well, Lewis, thank you very much for these updates. I mean, it was very, very eye-opening, especially everything that's happening with the big asset there. Building the most sustainable mine, maybe in tungsten or maybe at all, is quite an achievement. Obviously, we'll take a little longer, but now we have 6 minutes of Q&A. So let's dig into it. We have a lot of questions. So yeah, a lot of questions. So first off, when will there be an exact schedule for the opening? The last presentations were unfortunately a bit inaccurate, and as I found out in many forums with other investors, many are extremely dissatisfied with the fact that there is no exact timeline online and the last communication was postponed. So obviously, I think you partially answered to that, but if you can just confirm.
Yes, it's contained within this presentation. The reason why there was the delay was because we had one piece that was stuck in a port in France behind a blockade of angry unionists, and we had no idea when we were going to be able to get it out of there. I won't go into how we got it out, but we got it out in a way that perhaps is not traditional way, but it's out, it's on the water, and it's arriving in, what's the date today? It's arriving on the 16th of May. So that was the unknown, because that could have been held up for months and months and months. To replace it would have taken over a year. So, you know, the one thing that was made in France, and firstly, it was made incorrectly the first time around, then they remade it, and then it got stuck behind the picket line. So I know it's frustrating. I know it is frustrating, but it's resolved now. We found a solution. It's on the water. It was shipped out of Portugal. It's arriving, as I said, May 16th, I believe. And now we can start the surface works, and there is now more conservative, there are conservative dates now contained within this presentation, which we put on the website.
Perfect. So I won't go into other questions of people asking when it can be put in production and so on. I think we touched that clearly in the presentation. Have you been to South Korea recently? So did you see by yourself the progress in person?
I have not, because I've been stuck working on something else here, which will become apparent, but I'm heading there. But I mean, I've got my team guys are down there, and they send me videos. You know, we live stream everything. So the technology is, I mean, I got a faster internet connection at the site in Korea than I have here in New York. So it's, which I don't know whether that says something negatively about New York internet, but no, everything's live streamed. You know, it's a digital world.
Yep.
So I will head down this month, but I had to finish something off here before I could leave. Great.
I'll put a few questions together. So basically, how do you plan to manage cash flows before the production of the asset? And at the same time, do you need more financing before you're done building and putting production Sandown?
Well, we're making some money in Portugal, which is good. We will probably look to do a small raise over the next few weeks, because I'd like to accelerate my work on the tungsten oxide, which I think is very important to keep that momentum going, because there's a lot of support from the Korean government. But we do what we always do. We make a dollar last, you know, we stretch a dollar, and that's what we've always done. We've always operated leanly. I mean, you know, it's unfortunate in some ways that I work alone, We are looking to, as I said, we've just added a PR person. We will add more infrastructure to support, a COO to the company. I think this is important. We have to expand our C-suite now because we are about to take a leap into a much larger profile. Up to date, I've been playing the cymbals, the drums, the horn, and the bass drum. I need some more members of the orchestra. So yes, we are going to do a very small raise to put a little gas in the tank to enable me to build up that infrastructure and maintain the progress on this tungsten oxide, because this is where I believe we can add so much greater value on top of what we are going to achieve through Samdong itself in production.
Perfect. Going on to the same subject, can you increase the production in Spain to cover your running cost? And could there be also a partner to develop the moly resources / royalty or any kind of different inflow of cash?
Well, we will make an announcement about Spain shortly, so that'll be out. As I said, there'll be a press release regarding Spain shortly. In terms of royalties and as such, I tend to find they do not support or favor shareholders. They are designed to take value from shareholders, and I've resisted royalty agreements, streaming deals, all these things. Otherwise, why didn't I go get why didn't I get a financing for Samdong 2 years earlier with a high yield lender? Well, because it's a high yield lender. Whole idea is to maintain value for shareholders. And I think that's very important to remember. So yes, I'm going to look to generate more revenue in Spain, but at the moment, I won't do any royalty or streaming deals.
Perfect. Continuing in the questions, under your last slide, you show free cash flow per year of 300 million in 2030. This looks wrong. Should it be cumulative cash flow instead of annual?
Well, I have to be honest. Firstly, that was very well called. I assume he means this slide.
Yes.
Well, if I'm looking at this, it says cumulated cash flow summary.
There you go. Clear answer. Thank you, Dirk, for the question. And that's done. Now,
did someone try and get me there? Was that a gotcha?
They ask, I ask. That's
I know. It's okay.
Last question. How is the permanent availability of the systems ensured? Spare parts on site? How far is the financing of the nanotungsten oxide plant? Yeah, that's
okay. We've got all parts packages on site, so that's not a problem. In terms of the nano or the tungsten oxide, is that the scoping study is finished, and now we can submit what they call the PIM to KfW, which is now the trigger process to begin the journey towards the loan approval.
Perfect. Well, Mr. Black, that was all the time we have. Thank you very much for attending, giving us a South update. Everyone wanted to know about it. Our phones are ringing. We get email about it. So it's very, very appreciated that you took the time with us. And we now have, sadly, to go to the next presenter. Thank you very much. To meet Terry Lynch of Pyro Nickel. Once again, Mr. Black, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.